Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Harry McMillan from Momenta, the provider of the service, and I'll be taking you through the first part before I hand over to Jim a little bit later. So this is what we're going to cover around the Type 2 Diabetes Path to Remission Program, or T2DR as it's acronymed. And we're going to have it's probably going to be a fairly full session. So we'll go through reasonably swiftly on the basis that it's recorded, and we'll share both the recording and the slides afterwards. So I'm going to first talk about the background and benefits of the program, then the program itself, and then roles and responsibilities between primary care, yourselves, and us as the provider and the ICB. Jim will talk about the medication adjustments. Becky from Momenta, also who's the manager of the service, will talk about the support for referrals and the referral form, and Yasser will finish us off in the same way that he started. So topped and tailed by Yasser. Right. So in terms of background and benefits, I won't go into the research in too much detail because Jim is going to cover this in more detail later on in his section. But just to say, fundamentally, this service is based on the direct and droplet studies, which were the first to show that remission of type 2 diabetes in primary care at scale was possible through lifestyle interventions. As I say, I'll skip through this quickly because Jim will go into it in more detail. But fundamentally, the direct study concluded that remission was very closely linked to weight loss, and a significant proportion of people lost a much greater percentage of weight than was normally considered feasible through lifestyle interventions. And remission for this service, because there are a few different definitions that go around, is the same as it was in direct, which is being off all diabetes medications with an HbA1c of less than 48 millimoles per mole for more than 6 months. So in terms of benefits, there's obvious benefits to patients of achieving remission for those that do, but there's also this achieves typically a much higher level of weight loss than an average weight management program. So there's a range of benefits that you'll be very aware of that will go with that. As well as a reduction in medications for many of your patients, and also an impact on both other comorbidities and their quality of life. And the entire program is paid for by NHS England, so it's free to them, including all of the total diet replacement products. For practices, it's obviously a free service because it's provided by NHS England. However, there is work to be done at your end as well as at ours, which we'll come on to later. And there are there's some incentivization for that, which Yasser will talk about, as well as the weight management enhanced service fee, assuming that continues for eligible patients. Anecdotally, probably the more important benefits are around, but more difficult to quantify, are the fact that it actually seems to help reduce demand for successful patients on the service due to all of the benefits we talked about for them individually above. So just in terms of a bit of background on how the service is commissioned, this was originally piloted as the NHS low-calorie diet program from 2020 onwards in 20 ICBs, and we delivered in 3 of those, including Birmingham and Solihull, and relatively near to you guys. There are similar emerging results to direct, and so NHS England last year turned it into a national framework like the Diabetes Prevention Programme. They also changed the name and they changed the delivery format, so it's now standardised across all ICBs in England as of 1st of April, and we'll come on to that in a second. You are unlikely to have heard of us because we're relatively small in the grand scheme of these things. However, we did set ourselves up specifically to deliver this service when it was called the low-calorie diet. So that was our entire organisational focus, and it remains the largest piece of our organisational activity. We also do other things around weight management and cardiovascular disease prevention as well. So originally we started off in Birmingham and Solihull. We're now, as of 1st of April, we'll be delivering this service in 13 ICBs. And our early outcomes are also in line with the direct study and the NHS England pilot. And in Coventry and Warwickshire, the service will formally launch on the 1st of April, although we're having a kind of some degree of a soft launch in March, but kicking off with this kind of education session, but more on that later on. So the program itself, it follows the principles of direct, as we talked about. There are 3 phases. Your patients will go through 3 phases over 12 months. The first is called the TDR, or total diet replacement phase, and that is where they spend for 12 weeks. They have 4 of these TDR products a day, so typically soups or shakes, or porridges, and they have 4 of those products a day for 3 months or 12 weeks. Then that's obviously where the majority of the weight loss occurs. Then there's a structured period of reintroducing real food as phase 2. That takes 6 weeks. And then finally, there's the third phase, or weight maintenance phase, which lasts up until 12 months. And that's where there's, I guess, much more similarity of the content to, for example, a diabetes prevention program or a tier 2 weight management program. So it's about helping people to sustain their reduced weight, or in some cases to continue to lose it, with they're basically healthy eating and increasing physical activity levels. There's also a reset package or rescue package for people who gain 2 kilos or more after the third phase starts. So and that's up to a month back on TDR if they want that as a kind of refresher. The delivery format is a choice for patients of, it's their choice of 1-to-1 in person or digital, both supported by trained coaches. And we use Habitual TDR product. So Habitual actually set themselves up a bit like us, specifically to support diabetes remission. They now do other things as well, but that was their starting point, and we like them as an organization and their products. And we also use their app platforms for our digital service. So it's our content. So it's the same content for people whether they choose the in-person or digital, but and the same coaches, Memento coaches, but it's used the app platform by Habitual. And so our coaching team, just to be clear, are some have a clinical background, but they don't have to. And so we have some support, clinical support staff, including our GP medical director, to support the non-clinical staff where required. So who's it relevant for, this service? Its eligibility criteria include these inclusion and exclusion criteria. Because you have these in the slides, I won't go through them in great detail. I will just highlight a few, which is where sometimes we get people sent to us who are not eligible. And the most common areas are either being too old. So unlike the DPP, there's an upper age limit cutoff of 65 years old. There's also the type 2 diabetes needs to have been diagnosed within the last 6 years. And these eligibility criteria, I should say, NHS England are extremely, there's basically no flexibility, unfortunately. And we literally down to 6 years and a day, we can't provide that flexibility because we will get, that patient will be removed by NHS England. So it's really important to stick to these criteria. It's frustrating sometimes for individuals, and including for us, but it is what it is. HbA1c limits are, as you'd probably expect. So if they're not on diabetes medication, it's 48 or above. If they are on diabetes medication, it's 43 or above. And there's an upper age limit, upper HbA1c limit of 87 in all cases. On the exclusion side, other than insulin being an obvious exclusion criteria, there's a range of other ones. And fundamentally, if, in your opinion, as a healthcare professional, you don't think that it is possible to monitor that patient safely and robustly or make the required medication changes, then it's entirely, even if they fit all the other criteria, then you should not refer them to the service until you are confident that is possible. On to the program itself. So you can see the 3 phases here: the first phase, second 6-week phase, and down to a year. So you can see that the sessions aren't phased equally. So they start off weekly, then go fortnightly over this phase. They remain more or less fortnightly in this third phase, and then they become monthly in the third phase and remain more or less fortnightly in the second phase. We provide a range of different resources, which I don't have time to go into here, but we're very proud of. Obviously, the digital people get the app, but the in-person get a range of different workbooks and other things, including down to things like we've made a pack of cards to help people think about various different techniques they might use to address barriers and challenges and stuff like that. So it's not just a little workbook and good luck, and a bit of coaching. It's actually a really extensive set of resources and a very well thought through curriculum. Products point of view, there's 10 products they can choose from: 2 porridges, 5 shakes, and 3 soups. They're all vegetarian and 4 are vegan. They get a free shaker, they get free samples before they have to make their first order, and there's a specific website to go to. We provide voucher codes, and then they order and they can get it delivered next day to their home or work, order by 1 p.m. And that covers the entire 12 weeks of food reintroduction, of the total diet replacement, plus the 6 weeks of food reintroduction, plus the reset package if required, all at no cost to participants. Very quick snapshot of some of the resources. Just conscious of the time, so I won't go through this in great detail, but everything from booklets about the support with TDR down to online recipe books. A few snapshots from the app. Again, just in summary, you can see it looks quite clean. It's interactive. It's got some gamification built in, including some rewards, voucher code rewards. It seems to be fairly straightforward and easy to use, which is good. It's our first digital delivery, but we're pleased with the interface, and people seem to find it very intuitive, which is helpful. And so on to the roles and responsibilities. In brief, as we're providing the service and it's all GP referral, there's clearly no service possible without referrals from yourselves. So that's the first step. And there's a few different ways to do those referrals, which we'll come on to in due course. But fundamentally, at the end of, or to identify patients, but fundamentally, when you're making a referral, you need to fill out this referral and medication adjustment form and then send it to us. After that point, we deliver the service, and the only other things you need to do in primary care are a repeat HbA1c at 6 months and at 12 months. And also, if in the monitoring, which we'll come on to in a second, your patients exceed certain thresholds, then we will ask you to conduct a medication review with them. So in terms of what that means, we provide a fair amount of support to you in identifying patients, and I say we in the sense of working with YASA and Jim and the ICB, and a whole range of input from colleagues across the ICB and primary care. We have refined things like the patient information flyer and landing page, the referral forms that are being in the final processes of sort of sign off at the moment, and searches, and there's also things like animations and practice posters as well. We'll also attend events. Becky or Ramnik, who you can see there, will be very happy to come to your events in person or virtual, be that at practice level or PCN level, and support talking about the program in more detail. Once you've referred them to us, we will have an individual assessment, book them onto their preferred choice of digital or in-person program. An in-person program means that we will work to find locations that are convenient. We don't have to wait for a large group like we would in DPP or other kinds of group-based programs. We can deliver services to where we've got a cluster of 4 or 5 people who can attend our clinic, which we can put on. You'll find we have a range of venues shortlisted, but we're also very happy to deliver in your practices if you'd like us to your patients, because it's a one-to-one service. So quite a few practices actually have capacity to deliver these programs there, and if it's helpful to you or your patients for us to do so, we'd be very happy to coordinate that with you. Over the course of the program, at each of the sessions, or session equivalents for digital, but the same weekly, fortnightly, monthly sessions, and there's 21 in all over the 12 months, we will measure, or we will provide equipment to digital participants to measure themselves, blood glucose and weight for everyone, and blood pressure for anyone on blood pressure medications at the outset. And for blood glucose, we will provide the blood glucose monitor, lancets and strips, etc., that they need for this program. So there's no need for any additional prescribing on that front. We have a GP medical director who reviews those readings along with our team, and if they exceed certain thresholds defined by NHS England, then we will let you know. So if their blood pressure is too low or too high, or their blood glucose is too high, we will contact you and suggest a additional medication review. That does not happen very often, and as Jim will tell you, the medication adjustment guidelines are much more conservative and direct. So it occurs much less often than indirect, but it does occur to a degree. So very briefly, in terms of how to identify interested patients, there are three basic options. One way is to do a search, searching of the patient register, and then a short list of those, as kind of screening of those, and then sending out an invitation text or letter as you see fit. The second is unusual care, so be that at diagnosis of type 2 diabetes, annual review, or even at patient request. And the third is through bespoke events. So every now and again, some practices or PCNs are particularly keen to reach a particular target or priority group, and so they'll want to put on a patient event. We can support with those and talk about those. They're more there's much more effort involved in those, so we'd only suggest those if you've got a really good purpose and audience, but we're very happy to support. Otherwise, usual care is probably most relevant for patients because it's when they're thinking about their diabetes, or might be more likely to be thinking about it and what they might want to do about it. And the search and invitation is the most efficient from a practice point of view. In terms of supporting information, we have, as I said, leaflets and a poster. We also have a page of case studies on our website, which has extensive case studies. You can follow those links in due course. And now I will hand over to Jim to talk about medication adjustments, and I'll come back to you later. But I won't, I'll hand over to Becky.
Thank you. Next slide, please, Harry. So the type 2 diabetes remission program is based on the DIRECT studies. So DIRECT and DIRECT Australia, which have just published, were the first trials to show that intensive lifestyle in terms of total dietary replacement can cause diabetes remission. This compared to previous studies where there was a look ahead study in the States which didn't have the success. And some of the things are related to the criteria which you've got for in terms of people in the trial. So the people in the trial have a diabetes duration within 6 years, up to 6 years, and that contrasted with the previous study which showed no benefit. And similarly, the age group in DIRECT and DIRECT Australia, which have both showed very similar findings, the average age is about 53 of the patients who are on the study. So these patients are relatively young type 2 diabetics. In DIRECT and DIRECT Australia, both trials had the same protocol, and all glucose lowering medications were stopped at the commencement of total dietary replacement, TDR I'll say. And if the patients were hypertensive, all hypertensive medications were stopped at TDR. And all patients were encouraged to do 15,000 steps a day, although not all patients did. Next slide, please. So the base, yeah, that's it. So basically, the study shows that about 50% of patients who go on to this program, where they have TDR for 3 months and then gradual introduction of food, are in remission from the diabetes, as stated from Harry, on no medication for 6 months with an HbA1c of less than 48. And the main criteria, main likelihood of going into remission is based on weight loss. So if somebody lost 15 kilograms in the 12-month period, there was about 90% chance that they would be in remission. Next slide, please. But type 2 diabetes remission program differs from DIRECT. So unlike direct, not all hypertensive medications are stopped on on starting total dietary replacement. Basically, in general, the last class of agent which was used for blood pressure lowering is stopped. Also, the guidance is that only if you're on less than or equal to 2 medications for your sugar lowering should all those be stopped. And this is all guidance. And so it may well be that somebody was on just metformin and the GP who referred them wanted them to continue on metformin for a particular reason. But in general, it's only if they're on less than or equal to 2 that the suggestion is that all their diabetic medications are stopped. There are specific medications which will be emphasized again, but SGLT2 inhibitors, the risk of DKA increases with being on a low carbohydrate diet, which is obviously what direct is, and also because of the risk of hypos, sulfonylureas and metaglynides, which are short-acting sulfonylureas, are not indicated because of the risk of hypos on TDR. Some antihypertensive medications will have dual or triple indications, for example, ACE inhibitors for microalbuminuria and blood pressure. And it may well be that another antihypertensive medication in a person's list may be stopped on commencement of TDR. Next slide, please. So basically, this shows that when you start TDR, your blood sugar goes down and your blood pressure goes down. And these are quite significant. And in terms of weight and blood pressure, various studies have shown that basically a 1 millimeter, for each kilogram that you will lose in body weight, you expect on average a 1 millimeter reduction in systolic and diastolic blood pressure. And that is greater for people who are overweight or obese. So that's one of the reasons that you're stopping the blood pressure medication, because you're worried that when they start TDR, they're going to have a postural hypotensive episode. Obviously, when you refer, the clinical responsibility remains with the referring GP, and this is guidance, not clinical judgment. I mean, if there is a particular reason why you want to keep on certain medications, that may well be appropriate for that patient that you're referring. If you're really unsure or don't feel that the patient fits the criteria, then don't refer them. Next slide, please. So as I say, in terms of glucose lowering agents, if you're on no agents, then that patient would be referred without having to consider stopping agents. If they're on 1 to 2 agents, they generally would stop both agents. Although, as I say, it may well be that you decide with the patient that you want to continue an agent when they're referred. If they're on 3 agents, 3 or more, then you would generally stop 2 or more of those agents. As I say, the agents that definitely you have to stop are the SGLT2s and the sulfonylureas. As I say, insulin is a contraindication for being referred. And obviously, you should be counselling the patients when you refer them about possible osmotic symptoms. When you discuss with a patient to refer them, there's a medical adjustment form which Rebecca will discuss later. And that is a form describing the medication that's going to be stopped on commencement of total dietary replacement. Next slide, please. So as I say, sulfonylureas are not permitted because of the risk of hypos. Repaglinide and metaglinide aren't, which are very rarely used anyway, I suspect, but because of the risk of hypos. SGLT2 inhibitors because of the risk of ketoacidosis. After discussion, it was decided that if a patient's on GLP-1, then it is permissible for them to, if appropriate, a decision with the patient and the referring GP that they wish that patient to be continued on that agent, then that is okay for being within the type 2 diabetes remission program. pioglitazone, gliptins, acarbose, they're all appropriate to use if they're one of the medications that are continued. Basically, the Momenta have basically will contact you, contact the GP, referring GP if there's a problem. And so if their fasting glucose is greater than 15, then they would be contacted. Now, this is a very, very rare event. So in over 526 referrals that they've had over a 6-month period, they just had 2 patients who they referred back because their sugar was raised. So although, you know, the concern from GPs is this could be a significant problem, in practice, it hasn't been a significant problem. Next slide, please. In terms of referring with the blood pressure, so if they're on antihypertensive agents and their blood pressure is controlled, so less than 140 systolic and less than 90 diastolic, then the indication is to take the patient to stop a blood pressure medication on commencement of TDR. I say you have to counsel the patient about the concern about postural hypertension, because one of the things is that their blood pressure will drop with their weight loss, and so it's important to counsel the patient about that. And obviously, when you do the medical adjustment form, which is to state which medications will be continued and which medications will be stopped, then it's important to note which of the medications that the patient will be stopping. If their blood pressure is not controlled and they're on blood pressure medication, then that's an indication for not stopping a medication before they're referred. Next slide, please. So in terms of which agent to stop, you basically reverse the ACD for nice guidance, and then in order you'd go so spironolactone, alpha blocker, beta blocker, think about calcium channel blocker, thiazide, think about ACE-ARB in general. But obviously you consider multiple, so if an agent is not only being used for blood pressure, is being used for something else, then you would consider whether another agent should be, for example, if they're on an ACE inhibitor, as I say, for kidney protection as well as blood pressure, then you might go to C, so the calcium antagonist, to stop on referral. I asked the question whether you would adjust the dose instead of just taking the medication out, and basically the guidance is that you stop an agent, not, you know, if they're on Ramapil 10, reduce it to Ramapil 5, for example. So in general, you do that. And
it's a reset alarm for 5 to 2.
Oh, sorry. Hello. But so basically, in terms of people having a problem, out of the say 526 that they've had going for 6 months, 4 patients had a blood pressure which went up, and 4 patients had, in effect, the risk of hypotension, postural hypertension. So again, it's a very, very rare event. Next slide, please. Oh, yeah. Next there. So these are, so basically, if you've got stage 2 hypertension, 160 to 179, 100, 119, and the patient's on antihypertensive medication, obviously their blood pressure's gone up, then it'd be referred back to the GP. If they had stage 3 hypertension, blood pressure greater than 180, 120, it'd be the same day referral back to the GP. But I say these problems are very, very, very rare. And similarly, if your blood pressure is low, so that they're on antihypertensive medication and their weight loss has been such that their blood pressure is low despite them, because of their medication plus their weight loss, then they need to de-escalate their treatment even more, take another blood pressure medication off, they're referred. But as I say, That is 4 patients out of 526 over 6 months. Next slide, please. So some medications might need to be adjusted because of changing weight, and so the prescriber should be aware of these. Next slide, please. So there's a list which was given, and I've gone through that list and sort of GP notebooked it and basically just referred, given guidance and as to why. So in terms of warfarin, body weight, NOACs, body weight, digoxin, serum level, clinical effect. So basically, but it's basically there will be medications that a patient potentially is on where a change in weight will have an impact on their medication, and so GPs should be aware of that. That's it. Over to Rebecca, I think.
And just before Becky, sorry, there's a question in the chat, Jim, from Nida. If a beta blocker is for atrial fibrillation, should we stop it?
Well, no, I mean, I'd say that would be one of these things where you would look at, well, another medication. You would try and get a medication where the only indication is for blood pressure rather than a medication which has got a dual effect. And in that situation, you would keep the beta blocker on.
Great, thank you. So in terms of making the actual referrals to ourselves, so the first step is to identify and invite eligible patients. There is no right or wrong way to do this. It's whatever works best for your practice. So we will have searches available to be able to run within your practice, and we usually see around 10 to 20% of your diabetes population would come through in those searches as eligible. We would then advise from there to signpost to our leaflets, our website, or our videos so that the patient's well informed before asking a referral. The usual care is primarily used in most cases and works well for a lot of practice to discuss this at diagnosis appointments or general annual reviews, or perhaps when patients are coming in to ask around support that they can receive. The last option is a bespoke event. So this is something that we would do with the practice or PCN, if it's a PCN approach, where we would provide the education for patients if there was a large group of eligible patients that we could work with, and we would then signpost them back to yourselves to do the physical referrals. So if that would work better for your practice, we'd happily support that as well. So the second part of the referral is after the patient has confirmed that they do want a referral over to ourselves. It's to do all the things that Jim just said. So to review the medications that the patients are on and go through any changes with the patient so that they understand if they are going to be making any changes, what those changes are. It's also important that patients do realise if you don't want them to make any changes, that they also are aware of that whilst on the programme. We recommend allowing around 15 minutes. That should hopefully cover some of the slightly more complex cases, or patients are on more medications within that. On the referral form, which we will touch upon, there is a medication adjustment section. So this is where you will tell us what medications they're on and what the action is. We recommend providing a copy of this to the patient so that after the appointment, they are really clear on everything that you've discussed. We will check this with the patient, but we do sometimes find that patients get a little bit confused around what they spoke about, and then when they get to ourselves, they may not be that clear on what those changes are. Lastly, you'll send the referral to ourselves, the email that's on the screen there, and that will include all the referral details and the medication adjustment part as well. We will confirm with you for every referral whether the patient is eligible and we're proceeding, and we'll contact them, or if we're missing any information, or if they are ineligible and why. So in terms of searches, we will have guides and information on how to use the searches. These will be circulated after we've worked with the LMC on this, and that's the same for referral forms. So all of this will be circulated ready for when we go live in April. And the same for referral forms. So Harry, are you able to just share referral form? Great, thank you. So this is the referral form. There's a lot of information and support on here, and this has been developed by a lot of input from people who have been referring previously, and will have LMC input as well as the ICB that have all helped develop this. So this reform will go through what's required to be on this programme, so the actions that are needed. It has all of our contact details, so if you get to this point and actually you'd like to ask a question about the patient or the referral process, you can contact us prior to making the referral as well. The information will be mostly populated, so there's lots of grey parts that you'll see on the referral that will pull through the information from the patient as you've got their records up. So what you'll see as you go through the form is there's areas to then closely look at whether the information is up to date and we've got up-to-date readings for your patients. In terms of information as well on here, as we scroll through, you'll be able to see that there's advice on how to refer, the eligibility criteria and everything that you'll need. If you can keep scrolling, there we go, great. So this section's really important. So although a lot of this information will be pulled through, we've highlighted areas where it may just be a quick review of checking that we have up-to-date information. So you'll see there, for example, HbA1c, we need a reading within the last 12 months. So there may be a reading on there, but we need to make sure it's the most up-to-date reading. That's an example of something that we would come back to you and ask for an up-to-date reading in order to process this. So lots of information we'll process through. It's then just checking and confirming whether we're allowed to leave voicemails, that the patient does understand English, or whether they would require a different language on the programme, and checking the main criteria is met on here. Great, so then we'll move on to the medication section of this form. So there will be repeat medications that will be pulled through, so it will make it nice and easy to see what patients are currently on, to make sure everything that needs a review has been checked before sending the referral over to ourselves. We'll then ask some questions to check what patients are on, and if you keep scrolling, Harry, sorry, I think it's a bit delayed, we'll then ask into the table which says, as it loads, there we go. Section B has our table in, so it will be a chance to go through, add in the medications that they're on and the action. This is what we recommend giving to the patient, and this is what we will also, from a mentor point of view, make sure the patient has and understands. If there's any discrepancies between what the patient thinks they're doing and it's different to what you've sent us, we will confirm with you and the patient that everyone is agreed on what the medication changes should be. So this is really important that patients have spoke to you about this and that we have this copy. It's important as well to stress in the appointment that patients don't stop any medications until they start total diet replacement with ourselves. We will confirm that with every practice that they have started the total diet replacement and that we have made the changes with the patient. So they're not stopping after the appointment, it's just when they start the programme with ourselves. In terms of additional support on here, there will also be a section which provides information around things that Jim's covered around how to make the medication changes, and some questions as well with answers, so that there's lots of support on the referral form for you. Great. Can we go back to the slides?
Becky, just before that, it might just be worth just saying, as well as the eligibility criteria in the appendices, there's also a flowchart of the medication adjustments as a quick reference. So it's not exhaustive, it's not the full guidelines, but it's a summary basically. So it's all in the same place, so you don't have to go back and forth between documents when you're making the referrals.
Great, thank you. So in terms of tips and advice around searches, this is just here as a bit of a reference. So things we've just spoke about, the searches will pull through hopefully all eligible patients, but it's just confirming that they actually are suitable for the programme and that the results are up to date, which means that they're eligible for the programme. And there's lots of information there on the advice that we would give regarding that. So in terms of a bit of a recap, this is one of the resources that we will share that's on our website. So it goes through mainly everything we've covered today. So there's supporting links throughout the top. So the patient landing page we spoke about, the referrer webpage where we will be adding this recording along with the slides, our contact details, and if you would like to book in another session with ourselves at a practice or PCN level, we're more than happy to do some specific work with your practice as well. So to recap, there's two ways to particularly find patients: the search and invitation option, where there's the option of doing a bespoke event with ourselves once you've done that search, or through usual care through regular diabetes appointments and diagnosis appointments. There are SNOMED codes which we'll send out so that you know what the patient has done, if they've started the programme with us, and where they go throughout the journey. We'll keep you up to date on their progress. As we say, we recommend allowing 15 minutes. That's to be able to discuss the programme with the patient, make sure that they actually do want the referral and they're well informed, and to discuss those medication changes with them. Once they come to our team, we will do a check of all the eligibility. So we'll confirm that they do meet all the criteria. And if there's any problems with the referral, we'll let you know. In terms of the onboarding experience, so once with ourselves, patients will then be asked which type of program they'd like to start on, whether that's the face-to-face or the digital program. So you don't need to discuss that with them. We can help them decide which one would be best for them and to look at local in-person options as well. Once they're on the program with us, we will provide all the equipment that they need and products for the T2DR replacement part of the program that they will need. So everything is through ourselves. In terms of regular contact back with practices, there's a few different ways that we would get in touch. So when patients need to be discharged due to ineligibility, if they decline to be on the program, drop out or complete. If there's any threshold breaches, as Jim's mentioned, then we will get back in touch as well with the referring practice to let you know what they are. In terms of HbA1c, just a reminder that this does go back to primary care to do those HbA1c results. And also for any general care that the patient comes to, we would always advise they come back to their practice for their usual care. So just going to hand over to Yasa quickly.
Thank you very much. Just a little bit of update in regards to some of the process in regards to data, LMC engagement and finance. So we haven't quite ticked off all the boxes. So we do appreciate we kind of jumping the gun a little bit in regards to presenting this to you. However, we do need to launch on the 1st of April. So over the next couple of weeks, we hope to get all this kind of squared off. But in regards to the data protection, the DPI process, we've kind of shared that with the colleagues. It seems like it's on track, and hopefully by the end of this week, we'll get that put in place. And we've got support from the LMC in regards to that particular element of it. We also in conversation with the LMC around the clinical element, as well as the next point, which is the financial side of things. We've got a meeting with LMC next week, Tuesday morning, to kind of go through this, and we hope to kind of get their approval for the whole program, but also to kind of discuss about the costs involved, because like I mentioned, it takes around 15 minutes for the practitioner to kind of do this piece of engagement work and the referral, and we want to make sure that we are able to support that. NHS haven't been forthcoming with any particular with the exact number for the funds. They have offered us the funds, I just don't know what the budget is just yet. So there's a few things we need to, few very important things we need to iron out. So we're not going to be so forthcoming with it until it's finalised, because we don't want to send mixed messages. So that's where we're at. So it's a bit of a sticking point. These are very important elements, but we do appreciate your patience until we get that finalised. If we do receive any referrals, we'd be happy to pay for those referrals once it's been finalized. So we don't want those individuals, those practices who are keen to engage with the service to stop the whole LMC, let the LMC conversation stop that referral, but we will pay them for the activity. Over to you.
Great, thank you. So there's some contacts. Thanks, Yasa. And so there's some contacts here for you, including the ones from ourselves, from a mentor today, and from the ICB. On there, we do encourage, if you have any program questions, please do come to myself for anything on there. In terms of next steps, I will be sending out an email to everyone that's been on the call today and everyone that did book, with the slides and the recording and the links to our website where the resources will be. In terms of what else will be coming, so we will be putting resources on GP Gateway, and we do have a second referrer training session on the 10th of April. So please do encourage anybody else who may want to know about the programme to come along to one of our sessions. Like we said, we're happy though to also do PLT events, practice meetings, PCN meetings, anything that we can help raise the awareness and support referrals into the programme. If you are interested in one of your practices being part of the programme venues, there is a link, or you can just let us know via email that you'd be interested in hosting us. But thank you so much for everyone that has attended today, and we do look forward to your referrals. There's some questions in the chat. I don't know if we've missed any, but please also feel free to come off mute now and ask us some questions.
You got your hand up, Ellie.
Yeah, hi. Just right at the start, there is a question in the chat from Elaine Ross from Bridge House. Why is P/H, apologies, of bariatric surgery an exclusion? Just thinking about a few patients I have.
I answered that just now. I just, basically, so it depends on the bariatric surgery. If you had a gastric band, then there are relatively low risk of vitamin deficiencies. But if you have a sleeve, or if you have even more complicated surgery such as a Roux-en-Y, the more complicated the surgery, the more likely you are to have weight loss, but also the more likely you are to have vitamin deficiencies. So if you just went on a TDR, total dietary replacement, there's no guarantee that you're going to get the right vitamins in TDR compared, because you might need vitamin supplements in terms of. So I think it's just a practical consideration that these people would be difficult to give TDR per se without having more vitamin monitoring of vitamins. But certainly, I say the more beneficial surgery in terms of weight loss, the more likely you are to have vitamin deficiency. So if you went to a Roux-en-Y is a complicated replumbing of your intestine, and that basically is the most is more beneficial in terms of weight loss than a sleeve, and a sleeve is more beneficial in terms of weight loss than a gastric band. And so I think it would be because of the concerns about appropriate vitamin and mineral intake, given that you've had surgery which will potentially make you malabsorb.
Thank you, Jim. And Angela, just before we get to your question, I'm just going to talk to Julie's question in the chat, because it's a little bit easier than writing whilst trying to juggle things, because I can't multitask, where I seem to be incapable of it. So Julie has asked, from the point of referring, how long does it usually take for a program to commence? That does vary a little bit, and it varies on a couple of things. The first is that the first point after referral is for us to have the individual assessment, and we give patients the opportunity to book in a time that suits them. So if they choose to wait, if they choose to have it next week, that's great, it moves forward quickly. If they choose, for whatever reason, to delay it, it can be a little bit longer, for example, a holiday coming up or whatever it might be. Secondly, after that point, if they want to start digitally, we can do that almost immediately in terms of helping them download the app, and then they'll have to book in a session with their coach, which can be, again, within a week or about a week later. If they want to do an in-person program, then if we've got a clinic coming up in their area, they can join that very quickly. If there is no clinic in their area, then we will try to cluster people into an in-person clinic, and we can put those on reasonably swiftly, but it does depend a little bit on having probably about at least 4 or 5 people who want an in-person clinic who can reach one location. If we see that there are a couple of people who've been referred who want in-person, but they're kind of geographical outliers, as it were, then we'll get back in touch with you as a practice and neighbouring practices, and Ramnik and Becky will reach out proactively to say, have you got anyone who'd like an in-person clinic, in-person program, and we can try and put one on quicker than we would just by waiting for them. So the answer is basically it depends. It can be quick, but it can take a few weeks. Angela, to your question.
Yeah, I thought it was easier to ask them. I've got several.
Please.
Is there a fibre supplement at all when they're on the total diet replacement?
Yes. We provide that to everybody and recommend taking it.
Okay, fab, thank you. Second question was about language barriers. So other languages other than English, what's the provision around that?
Good question. So that again depends slightly on whether it's digital or in person. So we've got a central pool of digital coaches, and there obviously the location doesn't matter. So we can cover that a little bit better with digital provision. The written information on the app remains in English, but the coach sessions can be more easily bilingual or in different languages. For in-person delivery, it does depend a little bit on where they are and which of our coaches can get to that area and whether they can then make a time that works. So because the volumes on this service are quite small compared to DPP, for example, it's a little bit more, I wish I could say, yes, we can definitely do that, but I would be wildly optimistic if I did. But there are a couple of ways that we can address and work with both patients and you as primary care to address those language barriers beyond just having a coach who can speak the relevant language. So obviously we can encourage attendance of most appropriate of family or friends to come to the clinic as well with the individual. We can also and have in a couple of places tied in with practices who have a particular population or a significant proportion of their register who speak a certain language, and so they might have employed staff part-time to help translate with those patients, and so we can try to coordinate our clinic with the availability of that person to translate if that's helpful. So basically we'll do whatever we can to try and make it work, but I can't sit here and tell you that we have coaches who can speak all languages immediately available for in-person delivery, because it's just not going to happen. Literally, it's like 120 people a year, the entire ICB, who will probably take in-person delivery. Okay. But we'll do our best, and we'll liaise with you where possible.
Thank you. That seems reasonable. The final question was just about referrals. Originally, you said it was GP only, but then on the form that you showed at the end of the presentation, it said other people, other healthcare professionals can refer, but obviously then there's a tricky bit about diabetes medication and blood pressure medication, and then there's a GP incentive anyway. So if somebody else is referring, but making those medication adjustments, for example, what's the best situation? What's you preferred?
So I think it's the referrals need to come from primary care. So from the GP practice rather than a GP per se. And what that means seems to vary quite significantly from practice to practice as to who is considered competent to make those medication changes. And don't forget that also a significant number of people who are referred to this service, because it's within the first 6 years of type 2 diabetes diagnosis, will not be on any medications yet. And so there's no need for any medication adjustment. Some will only be on diabetes-related medications and not other medications. And so again, they're simpler, and especially if they're on one or two of those, because the guidance is very straightforward. And there are more people in practices who can deprescribe or who can prescribe diabetes medication only rather than all medication. But fundamentally, we have lots of examples in different areas of all sorts of people referring to this service. And I say all sorts of people, I don't mean that sounds crass, but I mean people with all sorts of different backgrounds. And if they're competent, if they're considered competent to prescribe within the practice, that's absolutely fine, be it a pharmacist or a specialist nurse. If they're only prescribing the medications they can prescribe, that's fine. But some practices have also said actually it's better to have a health coach have the majority of the conversation about the service, because it's they can spend a bit longer with the patient and they can talk about it in more detail, and that's all very helpful. But then when they have to do the deprescribing part, they have to get that signed off by someone else. So that's why on the referral form there's space for free text to enter into. There's space for the person who's making the referral, and if someone else is reviewing the medications, then they can enter those details onto the referral form as well. And then as far as the incentive is concerned, from our perspective, it would go to the practice rather than the individual. So it doesn't, that doesn't matter to us. It might matter to you internally, but that again depends on how you divvy that up internally within the practice.
No, that's fine. Thank you very much.
I should just say we have quite a lot of success of additional roles working across PCNs, be they dietitians or DSNs in particular, who make quite a lot of referrals because they get very used to the process and they see a lot of relevant patients. And so if that is something that works for how you're set up, I would encourage you to consider it, because it can relieve some of the pressure on GPs. There was a comment about a slot on Wednesday lunchtimes, which as you say, Jim, we're not aware we have a slot, nor am I, but we'd be very happy to take you up on a slot if it's you, Ian, or if it's someone else that we have to liaise with. But I'm sure Yasser and Ali and Jim can pick that up.
I'll email Rebecca.
Perfect, thank you. And there's a question about the limit on the participants, and I've just come from our monthly meeting with NHS England, where I asked them whether they were still of the same advice, and they are, which is there is a notional cap of 500 starters. That's not 500 referrals. It's 500 people starting the program over 2 years, but they are currently very relaxed about that cap. So they say just refer basically as many people as you can who are eligible and you think will benefit from it, and they'll worry about increasing the cap later. So not to worry about the actual cap. If you refer, a gazillion across Coventry and Warwickshire, they might change their mind, but we have monthly meetings with them, so we'll keep you well informed. I think the key generally they find is, and it's 500 for your ICB for Coventry and Warwickshire, not for all areas. But each ICB has the same limit at the moment, and obviously they're quite different sizes and populations and diabetes prevalence. So it's very a blunt instrument, but NHS England recognise that and are very relaxed about that at this point. So thank you for all your questions. Raymond, yes.
Yes, thanks. I just want to ask her about fasting, like Ramadan or any kind of religious fasting activities by patients. What's the advice surrounding that and referring such patients? Yeah.
So Ramadan's obviously the most prevalent one that we come across, and so we've actually, and we first started off in this program in Birmingham and Solihull, which has obviously a high South Asian population and a high Muslim population. So we have worked with both clinicians and participants to develop a series of resources for people who are on different phases of the program in Ramadan. So the guidance is obviously, there's some specific guidance whether people are on the first phase, which is all of total diet replacement products, or the second phase, which is where they're reintroducing main meals, or the third phase, which is the more general healthy eating and physical activity side. So we've got specific guidance for each of those three phases, which is quite simple and clear to follow and seems to be well received. And basically giving people options and suggestions as to how they might want to approach taking the different products. Obviously, it's a bit better this year with the timing than last year when it was more. Recently, it's been more in the summer, which the days are longer, which is just tougher, I think. But this year seemed a bit better.
Sorry, just to add a point to your comments there, Harry. I'm also one of the coaches as part of the programme. I have a few Muslim clients that I'm working with at the moment that are preparing themselves for next week during fasting. So we've been actually working on what the protocols are going to be and how it's going to work, particularly during the first stage of the T2DR. And from the programme itself, given eating before sunrise and eating after sunset, the programme is going to work quite well for those people. And it's not necessarily a concern because they're only technically allowed to have four products a day, so it's just spacing them out, and it's actually going to be more of a benefit to them because they're having to go through a longer period, more than sort of the 16 hours or so of fasting, and it hasn't caused any issues as yet. Obviously we'll find out from next week, but given the fact that they're allowed to have a product before breakfast and then kind of after sunset, a lot of people in my experience that I've been working with, they've said during that phase, as a religious ceremony, they've been able to lose weight. This actually is probably going to help them a little bit sooner because of the restricted use of calories during a longer period of time. So from my experience of working with patients, it doesn't necessarily have a negative impact as yet.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think we've kind of come to a natural end here. Is there any other kind of questions? I know I'm just very acutely aware that we've gone over our time, but it's been a really good conversation. Thank you very much for that insight as a coach. I think that does help. We've had a really good conversation, and I think we're sharing some information on there it is around Ramadan. So could we circulate that with the papers, Rebecca?
Yeah, we can. We'll share the link. It's on the website for participants. Wonderful.
If you don't mind just dropping in the chat so it's available for everyone, and then we could also do the email. So yeah, if there's nothing else, I just want to say thank you very much for everyone who's contributed to this. It's taken a little bit of time to get this together, but I think it's gone really well. We've got another session in April, so hopefully once the program started, and for those who are unable to make it today, we'll do another session and we'll do some more publicity to let people know, and hopefully we'll have some more clarity on some of the DPI data and finance element of things as well. So I just want to say thank you very much for everyone for attending, and if you do have any questions, feel free to email us and we can pick you up outside the meeting.